All right, I will now call to order tonight's city council meeting. Will the city clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Adam.
Here.
Councilmember Newman.
Here.
Councilmember Gutierrez.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Engler.
Here.
And Mayor Taylor.
Here. Next is our closed session. Ms. Noonan, will you please announce tonight's session?
Yes, thank you. We have 4 closed sessions on pending litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9A. The first one is Greenberg versus City of Thousand Oaks. Second one is Green versus City of Thousand Oaks. And the last 2 are GI Industries versus City of Thousand Oaks.
Thank you. We have no speakers on this item, so we will be going into closed session. We'll see you guys here in an hour. Welcome, everyone. We are back from our closed session. Ms. Noonan, is there anything to report?
Nothing to report.
All right, thank you. If you are able, can you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, so tonight we have a special presentation. I'm going to step up. Just give me 1 second. All right, tonight we are recognizing a group of local high school sophomores who have been friends since their, how old were you guys when you became friends? 6 months babies. Okay, we've been friends basically their entire lives. And looks like you guys met at Camp Amgen. And Madison Link, Kate Vaughn, and Cadence Lee are participating in a student-led campaign to raise funds and awareness about cancer. The team co-founded Team Rollover Cancer, that's great branding, and is part of the Student Visionaries of the Year program hosted by Blood Cancer United, and the team's goal is to raise $100,000 for cancer research, advocacy, and patient support. So we would like to welcome you guys up here, and we have 3 plaques for you guys, if you guys want to join me. Okay, that one's. Okay. Yeah, of course. We'll leave this here, and then you guys can walk away with it. Is there anything you guys want to say?
Yes.
All right.
Hi, everyone. We're so excited to be here. My name is Kate Vong, and I'm a student at Westlake High School.
I'm Cadence Lee, and I'm a student at Newbury Park High School.
So, as he mentioned, we met 15 years ago at Camp Amgen, and even though we all go to different schools today, we remain each other's best friends. The campaign has actually ended, but we were all co-candidates for the Student Visionaries of the Year program led by Blood Cancer United, formerly known as the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. We just wanted to spend a couple minutes sharing how we got here and the work that Blood Cancer United does for patients and their families.
I became involved in Blood Cancer United because both of my aunts on my dad's side are currently battling cancer, and my aunt on my mom's side has passed away from it. I wanted to raise funds that would lead to better treatments, more hope, and fewer families losing the people they love.
Both of my best friends had had very close experiences with cancer, and even though I have it myself, I recognize so many more every single day fighting this battle that no one should ever have to go through. Cancer patients lose so many opportunities and experiences that many take for granted, and Blood Cancer United is the largest organization that helps those patients.
Sorry. The work Blood Cancer United does for its patients and families is truly inspiring, and we could not be more grateful for the opportunity we get to make an impact.
In the 7 weeks, we raised $68,000, and we won the Patient Support Award, which was because of our dedication to Blood Cancer United's patient support and education services during our campaign. Out of the 21 teams just in Gold Coast, $1,100,000 were raised for patients and their families, which is so incredible.
Thank you to our communities and to all of you for your time.
Thank you.
Can we give them a round of applause? Do you guys want to take a photo with us, with the council? Can my council join me for a photo, please? All right, let's go up to the front. Next, we have public comments. Will the city clerk please announce the comments?
This is the time and place for public comments. Speakers are requested to state their name and community of residence for the record. 4 individuals have requested to speak, and pursuant to council standards, speakers are allowed 3 minutes. The yellow light displays when you have 1 minute remaining.
All right, and I'm seeing one on Zoom, rest in person, correct? All right, I'm going to call in-person speakers first, and then I will call our Zoom speaker after that. Everyone will have 3 minutes, and so you're going to see an orange light pop up. That's going to be your sign that you have about a minute left. And then when the red light hits, that's going to be your full 3 minutes. So if you haven't finished your statement by then, I'll give you, 5, 10 seconds, but let's get it closed after that. First speaker will be Michelle. I'm not seeing a last name. Okay.
Good evening. My name is Michelle, and I am Thousand Oaks adjacent in Santa Rosa Valley. And good evening to you, council members. I wanted to address a comment that was made a couple weeks ago by a Zoom meeting attendee. It was a comment in response to another request made by a prior speaker who is requesting that our national motto, "In God We Trust," to be placed in the council chambers. This person who was making this spontaneous comment, this Zoom attendee, claimed that she wanted to honor our traditions as Americans, but also wanted to keep church and state separate. Council members, I'm not here to school you because I have every confidence that you already know about the Constitution, its elements, and our nation's founding. But if anyone in attendance or is listening in hears these words, these facts, and seeks the truth for themselves, then I think that these words are worth saying. Keeping church and state separate, as the attendee had said, or commonly parroted, separation of church and state, is an incorrect, damaging, destructive phrase, that has been said over and over again and has been used to manipulate for decades. And the fact is that this separation of church and state is found nowhere in the Constitution. Furthermore, part of our First Amendment, the very first words, as a matter of fact, of our First Amendment, were created to keep the state out of religious business and to protect religion's free exercise and establishment. And so I will read verbatim the part of the First Amendment that applies right now. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Is there any word that says separation? This separation of church and state phrase, 8 words that were actually lifted and used by the U.S. Supreme Court for their own agenda, were words that Thomas Jefferson had written to a Danbury pastor to reassure the pastor that the state would not interfere with the church's business. Thomas Jefferson was not even at the Constitutional Convention, nor did he collaborate with any of it. But yet, a phrase that was lifted from a letter and used incorrectly has been lifted and manipulated. Thomas Jefferson actually is considered the father of the Declaration of Independence. And actually, God is mentioned 4 times in the Declaration of Independence. And what I want to say to you in the few seconds that I have left, because I didn't get a chance to time myself, is please do your own research, seek the truth, especially as we are approaching the 250th anniversary of basically the birth certificate of our nation, the Declaration of Independence. Please do your own research and learn and educate yourself. And I thank you for your time this evening. God bless America, and God bless ICE.
Thank you. Next up, we have Anne.
Hello, City Council. I appreciate your time this evening. It's so nice to see each of you here. I just wanted to thank you for remembering the foundational values that our country was founded on, and appreciate you bringing them to our local venues here in Thousand Oaks. It means so much that you uphold and honor the original reasons that we are even here today, that we get to enjoy our freedoms and liberties as Americans here in the US of A. Our national motto is "In God We Trust," and when I moved here so long ago, I remember seeing it in our city and local buildings and such, and it felt unifying across the country that we were all on the same page, remembering our national motto of "In God We Trust." That motto comes from "E pluribus unum," which is Latin for "of many comes one." And our country, locally and nationally, we have been really, focusing on the differences that we have, but we have so many things in common as Americans that we get to appreciate and enjoy together. And "E pluribus unum" recognizes that. Of many, we become one. And one of the many things that we have in common is our foundational values and God, the reason that we are even here. It's on our money, our little Abe Lincolns that we all have in our pockets. It's in the buildings, and I'd really like to see it honored here in Thousand Oaks. I appreciate the council and the city respecting our nation and its founding documents, which made our nation the amazing land of liberty and freedom. You have an opportunity as our local city council to unify your constituents by honoring the very values that founded our nation on God and the Bible. Other cities, such as Torrance and others in Ventura and LA counties, have already brought back "In God We Trust" in their local buildings where they meet and such, and I'd like to see the same here in Thousand Oaks, especially as we are celebrating our 250th birthday as a nation. I look forward to hearing what Thousand Oaks decides to do in recognizing that special day. Thank you so much.
Next up, we have John.
Aloha, City Council. How is everybody? Good, thumbs up, yeah. You've already heard me speak about "In God We Trust" a couple months ago, so I'm not going to repeat that, but a friend of mine gave me this quote from Abraham Lincoln, so I want to share it with you. I'm going to read it, and then you guys can read along with it. I'm going to put it on this guy here.
TOTV, we have something to show.
What? Oh. Oh, there we go. Is that? Can you guys see it? Yeah. Okay. Abraham Lincoln. He said, "We have been preserved."
Hey, John, flip it around. There
Oh, is
you
it
go.
upside down?
There
Oh,
we go.
So now I can read it too. Okay, thank you. Abraham Lincoln said, "We have been preserved these many years in peace and prosperity. We have grown in numbers, wealth, and power, as no other nation has ever grown. But we have forgotten God. We have forgotten the gracious hand which preserved us in peace and multiplied and enriched and strengthened us. And we have vainly imagined in the deceitfulness of our hearts that all these blessings were produced by some superior wisdom and virtue of our own." I don't think so. I think it's not virtue and superior wisdom of ourselves. I believe it's God. So let's get "In God We Trust" up. Let's bring Him back into our consciousness and encourage people to seek Him and seek His wisdom. And then I could say more, but I know you got a busy schedule tonight, so God bless you guys. I love you.
All right, next up, we have on Zoom Nora Hayes.
Hello, thank you for letting me speak. I don't necessarily want to make comments as much as I have some questions. There's actually 4 different issues that I wanted to address, but I understand I might not be able to address all 4 of them tonight, so that's perfectly fine if I can't. The first thing that I wanted to ask about, I am the board president of the HOA where I live. I live in Wildwood community in Thousand Oaks, and anybody who lives in an HOA knows that there's lots of issues that you're always dealing with in working with the board and property managers, et cetera. I understand that at some point in time, the city had, I believe, some sort of legal counsel that was available to homeowners who were having issues with HOAs. I don't know if that still exists or not. But the question that I would have, since HOAs are not regulated other than, from my understanding, by the CC&Rs, the bylaws, the rules and regulations, which are all interpreted in many different ways, is there anything that the city can do to help homeowners? You know, we all are taxpayers and living in this community. Is there anything that the city is able to do to help people who live in HOAs where their rights are really not, they're not being allowed? And again, I'm coming as a board president of an HOA. We have a pretty good board and a strong board, but like a lot of HOAs, we're dealing with our property management company that really tries to control what's going on and continuously tells us, oh, you could be fined or even imprisoned for certain things. And we find ourselves going, okay, I guess we can't make any decisions or do much of anything. But I'm wondering, is there any legal counsel available within the city for homeowners that don't understand their HOA and don't understand how to establish their rights within the HOA? I guess that's the best way to put it.
All right, thank you, Nora. We had somebody sign up just last minute, so Ina McGinnis, I hope I pronounced that right. Can you come? Yep, great.
Hi, thanks for this opportunity. I did not have this planned. I've never been to a city council meeting, but I just heard some people talk, and I thought that what they were saying was just something I couldn't let go without responding to. So the discussion about having God and messages inside the city hall, you don't have to believe in God to know about how to be kind, about how to do the right thing. There's lots of people who believe other things, and I think that a lot of times people use God as a mask or as something they hide behind to actually isolate other people who aren't like them. And I think that what we really want to do in our city is be inclusive and embrace people who have different opinions. I think fundamentally we do want to be kind. We want to make the right choices. I assume that all of you want to do that, but you don't have to do that in the name of God. You can do that as just a person who knows the right things to do. And inherently in your DNA, you know what the right things to do are. And also in terms of the Constitution and how it evolved, it may have been different when we formed the Constitution, but there is a concept called court. The Supreme Court then rules on things and makes additional case law, and that case law has continued to reinforce the separation of church and state. And this is something that we have functioned very well doing, and by that we protect people. We are not all Christians, and it's okay to not be Christians. I'm happy to associate with people who believe something different than me. It does not mean that they are bad or different. So to make the fact that God is the thing that unifies us all is just not true, and I hope it's something that you never think has to be the rule by which you operate or make rules or laws. Thank you.
All right, does the city attorney have anything to say for the comments? I know there was one about HOA.
Yeah, just to let the speaker know. So HOAs are separate legal entities, and the HOA regulations that are created by HOAs and imposed on the residents who live within that HOA, those are private contracts. So the city cannot involve itself in private contract disputes between a separate entity and an individual. But there are resources in the community. There's, Conejo Free Clinic provides some legal services, but the city itself cannot provide legal advice to individuals.
Okay, so maybe best move is find legal counsel. Yep, okay, thank you. All right, next up is consent calendar. Does anyone have any questions, or would anybody like to pull any of the items? If no discussion, can I have a motion to move? Mr. Newman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move the consent calendar.
All right, we have a motion. Will clerk take a vote, please?
And that motion passes 5-0.
All right, thank you. Next up is our first public hearing. Will the city clerk please open this hearing?
Yes, hearing advertised as required by law is open to consider agenda item 10A, film permit ordinance and related fees. There are 2 speakers who have requested to speak. Speakers are requested to state their name and community of residence. Pursuant to council standards, each speaker will have 5 minutes. The yellow light displays when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you. And presenting tonight's item is Deputy Cultural and Community Services Director Melissa Hurtado.
Thank you, and good evening, Mayor Taylor and council members. On the dais with me, I have Jonathan Surratt, our Cultural and Community Services Director, and Tracy Friedel, Assistant City Attorney. And we're here tonight to discuss film permits in Thousand Oaks. So Thousand Oaks has a long history in the film industry. You can go all the way back to 1935 when the New Adventures of Tarzan filmed right on the land that we are sitting in today when it was Jungle Land. Spartacus was filmed at Wildwood Park, and what you see here in this photo is the series Gunsmoke that filmed at what is now California Lutheran University and in Wildwood Park. So prior to the adoption of the film permit ordinance in 1997, there were no regulations for filming in the city unless city streets were being used, and then only an encroachment permit was required. So it became a bit of the wild, wild west, no pun intended, especially in residential neighborhoods where crews parked vehicles on residential streets and impacted neighborhoods. When the original ordinance was introduced, rigid restrictions were enacted, especially with requirements for approval from neighboring businesses and residents. The ordinance was brought back to City Council in 2009, but the ordinance was only slightly modified, leaving a lot of the restrictions in. The permits were historically processed by the Planning Division in our Community Development Department. In July of 2025, film permits were transitioned to the newly formed Cultural and Community Services Department. The transition to community services gave staff the opportunity to look at these permits through a new lens. When we first learned that film permits would be coming to our department, we decided that before delegating permit processing to staff, we needed to really understand and streamline our business process. So I, along with our office manager, Tracy, have been processing all of the permits ourselves. We quickly realized that there was a lot more that could be done with this program. It's been a great opportunity for us to engage with the film industry and ask them questions, to talk with other cities and learn best practices, and speak with groups like the Economic Development Collaborative, the California Film Commission, the Chamber of Commerce, to understand how filming can benefit our local economy. And of course, our colleagues at the Thousand Oaks Police Department, Ventura County Fire Department, Public Works, Planning, and Code Compliance have helped us to understand the challenges that we may encounter if proper regulations aren't applied. So we knew that we needed a balanced approach. What we also learned about working with folks in the film industry is that it is far less transactional and much more about relationships. They would prefer to just give you a phone call and walk through things rather than using email. We've been working to build their trust and provide them with as much information as we can to navigate through filming in Thousand Oaks. So in this picture here, you see Freakier Friday, and that was filmed at Newbury Park High School. So we found this incredible map from 1927. This is Paramount Studios, and it depicts all of the different places in the world that could be filmed right here in California. As the location managers that I've talked to over the last several months have expressed that Thousand Oaks is a very desirable location for filming. We have great landscapes. It's close enough to Los Angeles, and many crew members actually live in Thousand Oaks. But unfortunately, we've fallen off of production companies' radar. Our regulations are more rigid than other jurisdictions, and we have a hefty $5,000 expedite fee for applications submitted within 10 days of filming. That fee alone has caused a lot of productions to just completely overlook Thousand Oaks. The industry moves pretty quickly, and $5,000 can eat into budgets for some smaller or short-term projects. You've probably heard a lot of talk about productions moving outside of California. California has responded to that and began offering tax incentives to keep filming in California. And in Thousand Oaks, we kind of have the best of both worlds situation. Half of our city is located within the 30-mile zone, or the TMZ, and based on union agreements, filming within the 30-mile zone helps keep labor costs down, since they don't have to pay per diem or provide accommodations. Basically, it's just like showing up for work for the day and going home to sleep in your own bed. And the other half of Thousand Oaks is outside of the TMZ, but it's within a secondary zone that still offers some of the same union benefits. In many cases, it's treated a lot like the TMZ, where most people just go home at the end of the day unless the filming extends past a certain threshold. But production gets additional tax credits to film a certain percentage of shots outside of the TMZ, so it's kind of like a win-win for production. So why do we want filming in our city? Aside from being pretty cool to see familiar neighborhoods on screen, there can be significant economic impact. First, the crew being in town might be spending on food, shopping, and gas, and you might be thinking kind of what I thought when I first went into this, well, they bring in catering, so how are they going to be spending money at our restaurants? But here's a story that I heard from another city when I asked that question, and they were talking about how there was a film shoot that was across the street from a coffee shop, and the coffee shop owner walked across the street and said, hey, I know they're giving you guys free coffee here, but we have some really good coffee across the street. Here's some coupons, stop by. And guess what? They did. And from what I understand, this is very common. The crews like to go and spend their money at local joints. But it's not just the crew spending. Production is spending a lot of money here. They have to pay property owners to rent their properties, and not just for filming, but for staging equipment, for crew parking, and for their base camps. They may need supplies or equipment, and we'll be sending someone to our local stores to make those purchases. And when needed, they will set up people in our local hotels for accommodations. In 2022, economic impact from filming in Ventura County reached $90 million. As I mentioned before, with some productions moving away from California, we have seen a decline, but hopefully the tax incentives will help improve these numbers, and we in Thousand Oaks can benefit more from this. As staff worked through the various permits, we identified areas where improvements could be made. So listed here are just a few examples that I'll talk a little bit about. The first item, signature surveys, is not considered best practice in today's permitting world. Our current ordinance requires that for filming of 3 days or less, 90% of residents and businesses within 200 feet must agree to the filming, and for filming of 4 days or more, 95% of residents or businesses within 300 feet must agree to the filming. While in theory this may sound good, in a lot of cases, it's unnecessary. We have many film shoots that are very small scale where residents or businesses would have no impact or even know that there was something going on. On the other hand, if we had a film shoot that had widespread impacts, we may want to even provide additional notifications beyond what's required in the current ordinance. Best practice is to have notifications that contain required information delivered to the residents and businesses, while only requiring signature approvals in specific cases based on the impact of filming. We currently have an expedite fee of $5,000 that is charged when a production applies for their permit less than 10 days in advance of filming. In speaking with location managers, we have found that this has been a huge deterrent to filming in Thousand Oaks. We have found ways to streamline our processes, eliminating unnecessary steps, and a flexible policy will provide additional streamlining. We don't see the need to charge this fee, and instead setting a reasonable expectation for permit processing timelines is best practice. Larger film productions may need to use several locations, not just for filming, but for parking, staging their equipment, and for base camp. The way that their ordinance is currently written, a separate permit is required for each of these locations. This has caused extra work for the applicant and staff, chaotic organization of paperwork, and inaccurate reporting data. And finally, we're currently using software that does not work well for these types of permits. We're unable to provide access to agencies like Thousand Oaks Police Department or Ventura County Fire Department to review and approve applications. So we're doing the majority of work through emails, which is not ideal. To achieve the needed flexibility, staff is proposing that City Council adopt an ordinance that provides the basic framework for filming, but authorizes the city manager to approve an administrative policy that would establish the specific rules and regulations. But even within that policy, flexibility will be built in. For example, our new policy would have a requirement to notify surrounding businesses and residences within 300 feet of filming. But we had a film permit application come in recently for something that was going to be filmed in one business within a small strip mall. And the plan was to have the crew park on site, and they were going to take up half of that strip mall parking. So that would impact the other businesses in that small little strip mall. So in this scenario, under a flexible ordinance, we would require the regular notifications to the other businesses within 300 feet. But for that particular strip mall, we would require a signature survey of those businesses to make sure that they approve of this taking place, since it would directly impact their business. With the film industry always evolving, having our regulations built into a city manager approved policy will allow for updates to be made as needed without having to return to city council. And let's be honest, we've been at this for less than a year, and even though we've been able to consult with so many helpful people in crafting the future of filming, much like the evolving industry, we will also need the flexibility to amend the policy as it needs to be adjusted. It will be much more efficient to adjust our policy internally when needed, rather than scheduling a public hearing and amending an ordinance. We did some work to evaluate our fees, determine the amount of staff time that it takes to perform the tasks involved. We're proposing a restructured fee model, taking away a per-day administrative processing fee and eliminating the expedite fee. We are instead proposing to replace it with a model that is not only more reflective of the work performed, but only charges for what's needed for any given permit. Our old fee model penalized smaller productions by charging them for things that they didn't need. But they didn't charge enough for productions that were more complex and kept returning to staff with changes. This model, which was reviewed and approved by our fee consultant, is sort of like an a la carte menu, where you only pay for what you need. Additionally, we added one rental fee that we didn't already have included, and that is for empty city-owned lots that can be used for parking, staging, or base camps. And since we are in the middle of a user fee cycle, this gives us roughly a year to work under this new model, if approved, and any adjustments can be brought back during the citywide user fee study. There are several rental fees that are listed in the user fees, and those will remain unchanged. So with your approval tonight, staff will be working to finalize and approve an administrative policy. Part of our request includes software maintenance fees. So last year we found that adding a module to our existing business licensing software would provide the capabilities that we need for these permits. We had sufficient budget for implementation and this fiscal year's annual maintenance fees, but are requesting budget for the maintenance fees for next fiscal year. We are on track to launch the software on the day that this ordinance would become effective. Additionally, we will update all of the information on our website related to filming. In the next fiscal year, we will hire part-time staff to process both film permits and special event permits. We'll continue to streamline processes by learning as much as we can, striving to make our office a one-stop shop so that production companies aren't having to contact multiple people to film here. What I'm most excited about are the opportunities we have by partnering with our economic development staff and partner organizations to welcome filming into Thousand Oaks and highlight our beautiful city, while building filming into a thriving component of our local creative economy. We've come across some great ideas, and by working with our local businesses and residents, we can make filming something our city can be excited about. So as a reminder, here are the recommendations tonight. In addition to the three of us on the dais, I also have in the audience Bill Bartels, who is the film liaison with the Ventura County Film Commission as part of the Economic Development Collaborative of Ventura County, and he's also the current president of the Film Liaisons in California statewide. So we are all available for questions.
Thank you so much. That was a great report. Does anyone on council have any questions? Mr. Engler.
Thank you for the good report, and I'm all for doing what we can to make filming a little bit easier in our community. I think just a couple of small questions. I think what we had before was too rigid. I'm looking at this right now and thinking that are we able to give you enough guidance for the policy? Because basically the policy now is turn over a lot of discretion to staff to make those decisions. Do you have enough information from us to be able to guide the companies in a way that's acceptable to the city?
Absolutely, and we've done a lot of work talking to other cities and consulting with others on sort of best practices that have worked for their cities. Of course, I think for us, we may have to adjust those a little bit, but the good thing about having this type of policy is that if we decide down the road, hey, we need to tweak this a little bit, now we can just go and do this through an administrative policy. So it's just having the city manager adjust the policy. But we have, fortunately, we have a lot of cities that are using this model, and we'll be able to pull a lot from them, just as examples.
At what point would you come back to us? Is there some trigger point that would have you come back to us on a more of a policy issue?
We wouldn't necessarily come back with an ordinance change, but we'd be more than happy to come back with a report in the future to show you how filming is doing after this, maybe a one-year type of report.
Thank you.
Mr. Adams.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, that's a great report, Melissa. I can see you're very gung-ho to get started on this. very enthusiastic. That's important. I'm glad to see that there's an initiative to revive filming in the city of Thousand Oaks. As the report said, we have a long history of it. I like what you're proposing, certainly make it easier. Are there, on the marketing side, are there plans to maybe, I see Danielle Borges here, to work with the Greater Canary Valley Chamber of Commerce to market our city as a desirable filmmaking location?
We've had discussions with Danielle and team, and right now, this is kind of like our first step. So after we get this into place and we set up our policy, we get everything ready to go online, and we actually start working on the permits, then the plan is to take the next step. If City Council desires more filming in Thousand Oaks, we can absolutely take the next steps and work with the chamber, with our economic development team to see what kind of strategies we can develop to help bring in more filming.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, I think we have to get the word out that this is a great place to film, and I'm sure the chamber would be a big help in that. Thank you.
Mr. Newman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you very much, Ms. Hurtado, for your report. Very, very interesting about our history. Following up on Councilmember Adams' question, I had a conversation with a location manager, location scout, showed him the proposed law. His response and his company's response was very favorable, which is encouraging. I'm wondering if you've gotten that kind of response from other production companies as well.
We have, and like I said, they like to call us, so we're usually dealing with them over the phone when they're calling to look for locations and looking to get their film permits. And so we ask them, like, what would be helpful to you? Obviously, they recognize that we have to, our goal is to protect our residents, to protect our businesses, to lessen the impact for them. So there has to be a balance in that, right? And they completely understand that. But a lot of the ideas that we got, came from them and came from what best practices are in other jurisdictions and the California State Film Commission. We actually sent our ordinance to the California State Film Commission and had them review it and provide us feedback as well. So we have had very encouraging words come from location managers in the industry, definitely.
Well, I'm encouraged to hear that. Thank you.
Some of that advertising, Councilmember, will happen internally with word of mouth, with additional location scouts. So as Melissa was saying, so much of this business is relationship building, and as we have a chance to work with those location managers and streamline our processes and show them how easy and convenient it is in Thousand Oaks and how wonderful it is here, certainly we're expecting that word of mouth to continue as the best type of advertising for us.
Maybe just building on that very quickly, because it's a great question. You can hear the passion from Ms. Hurtado, Mr. Surratt. This was a strategic move. The council and community will remember when we did the departmental merger, there were a lot of things that we contemplated when we pulled libraries and cultural affairs together. And this community services model afforded us the ability to take this permit class, both these film permits and these special event permits, these permits that are for the Rotary Street Fairs of the world, and afford us some additional capacity in community development that is inundated with considerations right now, and put this into an area where it could have more boutique handling and service. And really treat it as more of an economic development incentive and an opportunity to leverage our existing venues like our theaters and our other things. So there is an endless amount of promotion and collaboration with the Chamber and others that we can do here. But in this case, I think just bears repeating that this was a strategic move to take this into a department that had the capacity and the bandwidth to dedicate this time and attention.
Mr. Engler. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think as I read through the proposed guidance, I noticed that it was the hours of filming was 7 to 10 p.m. Is there a reason to go as late as 10 p.m.? Is that something that is industry-wide
That is,
request?
I'm sorry, that is standard. However, that was just a sample ordinance or a sample policy. That is not going to be our final policy. We're going to go back and work. We needed to make sure that you guys would approve an ordinance that would allow us to go back and do the work. So we'll work with our planning team, look at our noise ordinance. We want to be mindful of what kind of other ordinances we have in place that might impact this. So what you saw in front of you is just sort of a sample of what we can have.
I see. So from my perspective, 10 o'clock is a little late, but the other thing is, it seems that this is a one-size-fits-all approach. Is there any thought of small productions, someone doing a documentary who's just 2 or 3 people? There's no street parking for cast or crew. Is there some way, is this policy broad enough to accommodate small productions?
It is. Actually, this is the opposite of the one-size-fits-all. We had a one-size-fits-all before. This is kind of like an a la carte thing. So we will only require what is needed for that particular permit. And so a small type of production that would come in isn't going to have to pay for police and fire review, for example, or police and traffic review, for example. The only time that would happen is if we have a production that's going to impact our city's streets. And we're going to have this approach where it's tailored to the actual impacts to the city. And actually, just going back to your point about the filming times, right now our kind of approach is a one-size-fits-all, and we've had things happening in like industrial areas where nobody cares what happens at night, for example, versus a residential neighborhood where that is truly impactful. We can take a look there, and if there's a production that wants to film late at night, then that's when we go back and we require signatures, right? Right now, the kind of a path forward would to be having a notification process. But if it was to be outside of the norm, then we would require those signatures and make sure that they are on board with it. Yes, what you were asking about with the small productions, this is going to be not a one-size-fits-all, but rather a very much an a la carte type of thing where they are only going to have to apply for what they need and pay for what they need.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Mayor.
All right, I have just one quick question, and it's just jumping on what Mr. Powers talked about. So with the idea of making it more competitive for our city, so we have an industry that's coming in here, and I recognize why the a la carte of fees is structured the way it is. Did I take this the correct way, that the fees are meant to be more of a cost recovery, not an income generator, and that in turn will get people here and then we'll shop at our stores, et cetera, et cetera?
That's exactly right. So our fees are just based on the time that it takes us to process those applications. So we took a hard look now that we've had, almost a year into processing. We kind of had an idea of what it takes to do each task. And so we're charging only for that. The only fees that you will see in our fee ordinance that are not actually based on the cost recovery are the rental fees. So if somebody wanted to come and use City Hall for a production or the theaters for Jonathan, we would actually charge something that is more than cost recovery.
Okay, and then I'm hearing this correctly from what you just said to Mr. Engler. The industry needs flexibility. And so you feel like this policy allows you guys to be flexible to work with the cities and figure out the best way to get their crew in, regardless if it's a 3-person crew or a 100+ person staff.
Absolutely. Okay. And I think we're trying to create something that is going to be streamlined, take a lot less time to process. We are only going to be, for example, the reviews. We are not going to have TOPD review every single application. They've already told us they don't care about certain ones that are not going to be impactful. So we've been working with them to understand what those are. And so now we've been able to work our business process to eliminate some of the reviews that might take a little longer for some of the bigger productions. So we can have these short-term, small productions come in, get their permit very quickly, and be able to do their film shoot.
Great. Thank you. I love that. All right, we're going to move over to public speakers. Right now we have 2, and I'll start with Danielle Borgia. And Danielle, if you need it, you have 5 minutes for this one.
Won't need that, but good evening, Mayor Taylor, Council, Danielle Borgia, President and CEO of the Greater Conejo Valley Chamber of Commerce. I first just want to thank the Council for taking this issue on. This is an ordinance we've been talking about for an extended period of time that really needed to be reworked. Really, I think that the original ordinance was a little bit to deter filming in our city, and I think that we realized that there is a tremendous amount of economic development opportunity in this space, especially as the state of California works to expand filming with their tax credits, and it's definitely been a topic of our hoteliers for an extended period. I will just give you two really specific examples to put it in perspective. Our first is with a small business, Pearlandia, our cat cafe. And about a couple weeks after their opening, they were approached by a reality TV show that wanted to feature their business, in one of their episodes. And again, short time frame, right? And we had this expedited fee. With the 10 days, they were not within that time window. And so they called us and said, they want $5,000 to, have us come film in this space. We're just trying to promote our new business. And I literally called Hader at the time and said, is this right? Because this is what they're telling me. And sure enough, $5,000. And that lost them the opportunity because they weren't able to, they weren't going to make money off the shoot. It was literally a promotional opportunity. And then the opposite, we had a situation at Palm Garden Hotel that they were going to actually utilize for a TV show. And, they had to... The commercial is very separated, right, from the residential behind that. They have the Ralphs, we've got the hotel, and they had to go get, signatures from 90% of the residents in a certain variance behind that commercial space for a shoot at a hotel that had no bearing on those residents within that area. And so those are just two examples, and they actually pulled it off. Inside the less than 10 days, they paid the $5,000. It was worth it to them with what they were going to bear from a revenue standpoint. But I just think about those two examples and how much more that we could do for our businesses in our community. And, we look at, obviously, from the business perspective, we're not looking at, a heavy residential piece, but I think there are just so many ways that we can do this better. And I really appreciate Melissa and team reaching out to us to make sure we're an active part of this process. We have talked to some location scouts ourselves, too, and got some feedback ahead of this because this is not necessarily our area of expertise either. So we want to make sure that we're taking the time to really make sure that we have a good ordinance in place. And again, the marketing is important, but I think the word of mouth will spread, and it's really just kind of repairing that reputation a little bit, that we are really taking this seriously and want to be a filming-friendly city. So with that, the Chamber is highly supportive. Thank you so much for your time tonight and your work on this effort.
Right, next up, we have Kyle Rohrbach.
Good evening, City Council, Mr. Mayor, staff. I am speaking tonight very much in support of the proposed changes. To introduce myself, my name is Kyle Rohrbach. Many of you know me. I've lived in Thousand Oaks for a long time. Also, just so it's out in the open, I'm also the vice chair of TO Arts, which, while subjectively is related, that is actually not why I'm here tonight, speaking on behalf of myself, but also through my professional background, which has been as a producer in television and unscripted content for the last 15 or 20 years. And when I read through all the documentation, the staff report, the resolution, I had a jolt of energy about the potential that I think the Conejo Valley has, in large part due to our surroundings, our incredible chamber, our businesses, to become a hub for film and television production. I think that has long been an opportunity for us, and I am so excited to see us start to capitalize on it. So the notes I have here are not at all criticisms. They are things that I would love to see as you develop the policy, because I think, honestly, that is probably the biggest change that I'm most excited about and support of, is moving to a more flexible way, because the industry is changing so quickly and jobs are limited at the moment. The way that people are creating content now is evolving, and the way that traditional film production has happened for so long in the past is changing very, very quickly. So to have a flexible policy is something that I'm very much looking forward to. And it's through that lens that I actually share some of these notes with you, is the lens that a lot of my background has actually not been in big production. When you think of like blockbuster feature film, like a Freakier Friday, the reality is those are actually becoming fewer and farther between in production size. So what is more of what we're seeing now are your digital creators, your YouTubers who now have staffs of their own of 15 or 20 people. They're working in budget ranges where if you were producing in broadcast television, you would be shocked at how little they're spending. But if you were just shooting something on your iPhone, you'd be shocked at how much they're spending. It's that weird gray area, and that is an interesting place to be. So one of the first suggestions I have for the policy is much in the same way that we have a like student film category that kind of sets a separate set of policies for student filmmakers. I would contemplate identifying some version of a digital content creator category that will fit in this weird gray area that might not always be able to pay even our a la carte fees, but still will generate revenue because the amount of these folks that exist now would love to come here and film if it's accessible to them. On that note, I think that potentially looking at a tiered fee structure in that same category for a policy where you're looking at potentially an ultra low budget, you can use SAG or union guidelines for what some of those look like to assess which fees belong in which category. I think that I did notice seem like you're removing the expedited fee, the $5,000 fee, which is outstanding. I think some definition around what an expedited process looks like, even if there is a little fee, that's a very common thing that people are used to. Something just to clear that up. Something just as a producer I would love to see would be a baseline insurance schedule. I think right now the language suggests that it would be up to the risk management department. For a producer, that can be scary because you don't necessarily know what you get when you come present. So something, and maybe making sure we're doing the research about what reasonable insurance policies are. And then finally, it's already been said by multiple people here, this has to be a comprehensive effort. Changing this policy alone is not going to be enough. It will require marketing, it will require the word of mouth, it will require partnership with our chamber, and I'm really excited about it. I'd love for us to continue to think outside the box. Should we have a film commission? Let's support a film festival in this area. Let's continue to look forward to where the industry is going and really capitalize on it. So thank you. I'm in large support.
Thank you, both of you. Does staff have any comments to respond to anything said?
Yes, thank you to Ms. Borgia and Mr. Rohrbach. Just to respond to Mr. Rohrbach's comment, we will definitely be taking a look at this over the next year to see how we can make adjustments. We want to establish our policy. As far as the tiers are concerned, as far as the tiered fee structure, we based on the work we do. This is a purely cost recovery. I think for most productions, especially smaller productions, they're going to see a pretty significant decrease in the fees that they're paying now. But as I mentioned in the report, we are in the middle of a cycle. We have a whole year to test this out. So when we come back for our annual or biannual user fee schedule, we'll have the opportunity to take a look at how things are going and what that looks like at that time. And as far as the baseline insurance schedule, we have had discussions with risk management. I think we're at the baby step stages right now. So as we are moving forward, we need to better understand what kind of insurance might be needed under certain circumstances. And that is something that we strive to work for, but it's not, right now we're going to have our standard insurance policy, and then we'll be working towards that in the future.
Mayor, if I can just add on to that real quickly. Understanding as well, all of this is intended to provide a high degree of flexibility. So as Ms. Hurtado said, we're going to take the feedback over the next period of time. As we start to roll this out and start to make improvements on that, it's much easier for us to do from an administrative policy. In terms of the marketing, it is a team effort. We're all going to be in it together. Albeit in part of our recommendations tonight, we're also asking you to approve funding so we can put a couple of part-time permit technicians to work in processing all of these. I would hate to overdo our marketing efforts so much that we put ourselves behind the 8 ball and can't keep up with that workload. What we're looking for is a way for us to start to roll this in, really learn from what we're doing, learn from the process, get feedback from the industry, and be able to incorporate that in so we can continue more of a sustainable model and a continuous learning environment as we do it, so we can evolve appropriately with the industry.
Great. Thank you, guys. Thank you both. Does anybody else have any questions after hearing anything for staff? All right. I will now close the public hearing. And would anyone like to make a comment or a motion? Mr. Adams.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. Well, yeah, the film industry has changed incredibly over the last 10 years. It's almost unrecognizable of what's happened. Like Kyle said, the YouTubers, the streamers, but I do know content is king. Whether it's Hulu or Paramount Plus or Netflix, boy, they got to keep those subscribers interested. And so many series out there. But it's all too often at the end of an episode, I see filmed in Canada. Thank you to the state of Georgia. Let's bring it back to California. This is where it all started. And I love this initiative to bring it back to Thousand Oaks in particular, obviously. So I just like the film industry is changing, we have to be flexible too. And I think we brought that out very well in this. And we cut some red tape, cut some costs, get that in place, do some marketing, and hope to see some booms and some cameras and some actors out on the streets. I think it's going to work well. So I thank you for all your work on this too. I know you spent a lot of time on it. So I will move 10A, the film permit ordinance and related fees.
Mr. Engler.
Staff recommendation.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I also enthusiastically am in favor of this. I have a couple of small caveats. And for me, it sounds as if Councilman Adam is looking for a extras job or something, perhaps fall into a little acting. But the thing that I'm 100% in favor of this, I think dropping that expedited fee, as some of the speakers said, is something that really hindered any production. And I think in '97, when this was developed, the thought was to keep production out of our city. The one thing I would just give some advice to is, I think Ms. Borgia mentioned it, there's a difference between residential productions and there's a difference between using a commercial or industrial area for filming. I think to really make this work well for everybody, I think we should have sensitivity to uses in residential areas, more so than some of the other ones. So that's my only caveat that I would give out to you as far as policy goes. But otherwise, I think moving to this, encouraging more production locally, bringing it back from Georgia and from Canada, and maybe even getting a film credit, thank you, Thousand Oaks, would be nice to see on my next reality TV binge.
I like that.
Hey, Mayor, could I add just one thing real quick?
Yep.
Yeah, when you talk about the economic multiplier effect, I looked that up. The Motion Picture Association says a single day of filming in a city could add anywhere from $670,000 to $1.3 million to the local economy. So, as you say, we're net neutral on this thing, but what it can do for the local economy can be really fantastic. With 3,500, I didn't know that, 3,500 people here in Thousand Oaks are in the film industry. That's amazing. So just wanted to put that in there. Thank you. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Council member, that's 3,500 countywide, just to be clear.
That would have been a big concentration here, huh?
That would have been a pretty high number, yeah. Thanks for the correction.
Yeah. So actually today and yesterday, myself and Danielle with the Chamber of Commerce, and we had a professor from CLU, held a financial summit at Newbury Park High School for the seniors for the last 2 days. And we talked heavily about jobs and, the opportunity to earn. And I had 4 people come up to me today and say they wanted to be content creators, right? That was so random 10 years ago. That is a full industry now. So I love that. Those comments were good. I really liked Mr. Angler's comments, being mindful of the residents. I think we would naturally be, mindful of that. One thing I thought of though, has anybody had a friend or rented out a house for anyone that wanted to film a movie? Oh my gosh, the rental prices are phenomenal. Right, so that might be good if it works out at good timing. Now some of our residents have the opportunity to make money. The thing I like the most about this is, number one, we're modernizing a 30-year policy to actually enable us to be competitive. That's one thing that is really hard for me, is when our state is so heavily regulated and we watch industry go elsewhere. That's frustrating to me. I would love for people to be doing things here. So I totally support this. I love how enthusiastic you are about it. You can totally tell. And I think this will be a good policy moving forward. So now that we have a motion on the floor, can you call the vote?
And that motion passes 5-0, and your ordinance title is Ordinance Amending Thousand Oaks Municipal Code Relating to Regulation of Commercial Filming in the City, repealing and replacing Title 4, Chapter 8.
Thank you. And now we're going to have our second public hearing. Will the city clerk please open the hearing?
Hearing advertised as required by law is open to consider agenda item 10B, solar panel canopy replacement at Los Robles Greens Golf Course, MI 2668. There are no speakers for this item.
All right. And presenting the item tonight is Facilities Manager Josh Koenig Brown.
Good evening, Mayor Taylor and council members. Staff will be presenting tonight on the solar panel canopy replacement at the Los Robles Greens Golf Course, MI 2668. I'm joined tonight by Finance Director Jamie Boscarino and city staff to provide details on this project. In 2023, the city selected a design and build contractor to install prefabricated solar installations across 6 city sites. The 3 solar arrays at the Los Robles Greens Golf Course were part of this project. Within less than 3 months of their completion, one of the arrays was struck by a box truck while traveling through the parking lot. Engineering assessments of damage continued through February 2025, and a clearly defined structural repair scope was determined. Over the next several months, the original contractor and city staff negotiated price and contract terms. After extensive discussions, the contractor failed to provide a project schedule with cost estimates within the previously defined budget limits. It was at that point that the city staff began pursuit of independent pricing to fulfill the project scope. City staff determined that a design-build contract would be the best option for the unique qualities of this project, but specific goals would need to be accomplished in this contractor selection. First, the process would help mitigate any additional time delays that had been experienced previously. Secondly, the contractor could be selected on the best option for the project requirements. And finally, conditions of an energy service agreement must be met according to the California Government Code 4217. This slide shows the project site highlighted with the yellow box, located at the middle of the parking lot, just south of the golf course clubhouse. The number 2 array, north end, was damaged when a box truck collided with a structural girder beam. In February of this year, city staff received a comprehensive proposal from Pavletich. This proposal utilized the design of the original steel fabricator provided in the CI 5562 project. It centralized fabrication and installation resources under one contract to ensure all scope items were being met under a cohesive plan. Pricing provided proved to be more competitive than cost estimates from the original design and build contractor. There are funds now available for use in the amount of $376,872 for the current fiscal year. The nature of the damage required that both inverters associated with array number 2 be shut down. Array number 2 is capable of producing approximately 34% of the total conservation facility's capacity. The amount of solar energy being generated varies throughout the year, with approximately $4,611 per month being generated from array number 2. The savings from solar array number 2 being active accounts for approximately $55,000 annually. This means with array number 2 restored, the conservation facility will take less than 28 months to recover the cost of this project. Based on current fluctuations in the market, our current cost proposal from Pavletich has a price guarantee until April 1st. With current scheduled projections, it is anticipated that the project will take less than 8 months to complete and that array number 2 will be restored to full capacity by December of this year. Based on the information presented, we have the following recommendations. Adopt resolution making certain findings required under Government Code Section 4217.10 through 4217.18. Award a design and build contract to Pavletich Electric and Communications Incorporated in the amount of $312,917.86, plus contingency and reserve amounts for a total of $364,209, with a term that is ending in January 2027. Authorize the city manager or designee to execute the agreement with Pavletich Electric and Communications Incorporated upon approval by the city attorney. Authorize expenditures in fiscal year 2025-26 in the amount of $364,209 for MI 2668 solar panel canopy replacement. Delegate authority to the city engineer to approve any changes to design, plans, specifications, or working details of the project, and find that this action is categorically exempt from CEQA pursuant to California Public Resource Code 21080.35.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm going to start with council. Does anybody have any questions? Mr. Newman.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for your presentation. Just one question. This is a repair job, is it not? So there's no addition of solar capacity, no change in the amount of capacity that was originally approved, correct?
Absolutely correct,
Very
Councilor.
good. Thank you.
All right, next up, we don't have any public speakers. So council has no additional questions. I'll close the public hearing. And would anybody like to make a comment or a motion? Mr. Engler.
I'm happy to move this staff recommendations, I think 1 through 6.
Thank you. And will the clerk please prepare the vote?
That motion passes 5-0.
All right, the three-peat next is our last public hearing. Will the city clerk please open the hearing?
Hearing advertised as required by law is open to consider agenda item 10C, the 2026 Active Transportation Plan. Speakers are requested to state their name and community of residence. One person has presented a speaker card and pursuant to council standards, that person is allowed 5 minutes. The yellow light displays when 1 minute remains.
Thank you. And presenting the item tonight is Associate Engineer Mark Bueno and consultants from Linscott Law and Greenspan Engineers.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor and members of the council. My name is Mark Anthony Bueno, and I'm an associate engineer with the Public Works Department. The presentation before you today is the 2026 Active Transportation Plan, also referred to as the 2026 ATP. City staff and the consultant team, Linscott Law and Greenspan Engineers, have been working together over the last 12 months to update the ATP, which was first adopted in 2019. Extensive data-driven analyses and community outreach were conducted over this time, and the draft document was released for public review last month. On February 25th, 2026, the Traffic and Transportation Advisory Commission reviewed the draft and unanimously recommended that City Council adopt the ATP with consideration of the public and commissioner comments. Accordingly, the 2026 ATP considered all feedback and comments received during the entire public outreach process, from April 2025 through mid-March 2026. And with that, I will pass it to Ms. Besa with Lynn Scott Long Greenspan Engineers to begin the presentation.
Good evening. I'd like to thank Mayor Taylor and the City Council for having us here tonight. My name is Angela Bessa, and I'm a transportation engineer with Lynn Scott Law and Greenspan Engineers, or LLG. As mentioned, LLG is the traffic consultant for the city on the City of Thousand Oaks 2026 Active Transportation Plan. I'm here with Zawar Syed, our principal, as well as a couple of other staff members, Arash Ghaffar and Brian Cortez, to answer any questions that you may have. So just going through a brief agenda of the presentation tonight, we'll go over the project introduction, as well as the public outreach overview, the existing conditions analysis, the 2026 ATP recommendations, as well as the next steps. So starting with a bit of background of the Active Transportation Plan, it was developed to provide the city with planning guidance for non-motorized travel infrastructure improvements for the future. It strives to promote biking and walking, which reduces VMT and GHG emissions. It also heavily relies on public outreach and takes into consideration input from the local community, stakeholders, and city staff. The current ATP was adopted back in December of 2019, and the city has undertaken this project as ATPs are intended to be updated every 5 to 7 years, and this considers changing travel patterns, infrastructure changes, and keeps projects eligible and competitive for funding through grants that have multi-year cycles. A quick review of the ATP recommendations back in 2019, and the 2026 ATP builds upon these recommendations. The city has completed 6 bike projects, including installing Class 2 bike lanes and Class 3 share rows since the 2019 ATP, as well as 5 sidewalk projects. And we wanted to note that the number of projects that can be completed often depends on the availability of grant funding. In addition, there have been around 17 bike projects that have been completed through the city's pavement program in the last 3 cycles since 2019. Here you can see an example of one of those completed 2019 ATP projects. This is Rancho Road at the 101 southbound ramps, which is along the corridor from Hillcrest Drive to Holland Drive. And as you can see in the photo, Class 2 bike lanes and green transition lanes through the intersection were implemented back in 2023. I'll now hand it over to Mr. Bueno to provide the public outreach overview.
Thank you, Ms. Besa. An important component of the ATP is public outreach, which started at the beginning of the project. An ATP website was created which contained all project updates, including upcoming events. A feedback form and online comments map where you could post concerns and pin them to a specific location was available on the website. Comments received during this stage of the project generally noted narrow or missing bike lanes, followed by vehicle speeding, which were included in the existing conditions analysis. There were also comments regarding the addition of crossing guards and marked crosswalks. However, we want to clarify that the ATP does not modify the city's adopted policies regarding these items. Existing policies are used to inform ATP recommendations, but the criteria for a crossing guard or marked crosswalk remain the same and are outside the scope of the ATP. The outreach process also included focused print and digital media in both English and Spanish. Some highlights are provided here. Social media posts on the ATP collectively garnered over 10,000 views. In addition, an ATP advertisement was included in the February 27, 2026 edition of the Thousand Oaks Acorn, which has a total print and digital readership of over 80,000. Information on the ATP was also in various citywide email newsletters with a combined subscriber list of approximately 25,000. Emails were sent multiple times, alerting subscribers to different phases of feedback opportunities. Furthermore, information on the ATP was displayed on digital signage at both library locations, and flyers were available at the Thousand Oaks Community Center. In addition to the project website and social media outreach, the project team participated in a variety of events and workshops throughout the past 12 months. These events were used to publicize the ATP and engage with as many members of the community as possible. Some of these events, such as Arbor Earth Day and the Wellness Fest, had over 700 attendees. Other events were focused engagement. For example, the project team attended 2 meetings with the Bicycle Advisory Team, also referred to as the BAT, to obtain feedback from representatives in various cycling organizations and individual cyclists of varying skill levels. There was a virtual workshop for the Conejo Valley Unified School District and an ATP booth at the Ventura County Bike Rodeo event at Redwood Middle School. The city also collaborated with bilingual ambassadors to obtain feedback from the Spanish-speaking community. At each of these events, attendees were introduced to the ATP and encouraged to participate in providing feedback at varying stages of the project. Community members who had comments were collected at the event and were encouraged to submit feedback through the ATP website, which were then reviewed as part of the analysis. I also want to note that this is the city's largest public outreach effort to date for a citywide transportation plan. And I will now pass the baton back to Ms. Besa.
So moving on to the existing conditions analysis. As in the 2019 ATP, we've conducted a comprehensive review of existing infrastructure and development patterns to inform recommendations for new or upgraded multimodal facilities. This incorporates more recent demographics, infrastructure assessments, and collision data analysis. Those infrastructure assessments include reviewing the existing facilities for bikes, pedestrians, and transit. We also reviewed collision data from the last 5 years, 2020 to 2024, which was the most recent data available at the time of the launch of the product, sourced from the statewide Integrated Traffic Record System, or SWITRS. During this period, 112 bicycle-related collisions were recorded and 96 pedestrian-related collisions. These numbers are down from the study period included in the 2019 ATP, which noted 157 bike-related collisions and 117 pedestrian-related collisions. And that represents a 24% drop, which is encouraging and reflects recent city efforts. Again, this review informs our understanding of the baseline active transportation conditions throughout the city. So a big component of the 2026 ATP is the propensity model. And the propensity model basically shows an inclination or natural tendency to behave in a particular way. The propensity model takes various existing conditions and demographic data into consideration and generates maps that show how likely each point on the map is to generate biking or walking activity. So you can see here the first one is attractors, which are based on existing points of interest and that are activity centers known to attract bicyclists and pedestrians. It also included generators, which are based on census demographics and the built environment data, as well as considering barriers for active transportation, which might include speed limits posted on roads, the existing bike or sidewalk facilities in the area, collision history, among others, all of which indicates the degree of difficulty required to travel in these modes. So you can see here the propensity model for pedestrian activity. Areas that are red have a higher propensity, and areas in blue have a lower propensity. So you can see that the area around Thousand Oaks Boulevard and other commercial areas surrounded by residential uses are likely places for people to walk. Areas less likely mean that there might be less attractions or less people or less facilities available in that area. You can see here a comparison to the 2019 ATP pedestrian activity model. And when comparing to the 2019 model, you'll see a few highlighted areas that differ from the current model. And some reason that this can occur is we've noted that there has been an increase of mode share of work from home for workers in Thousand Oaks. There's also been an increase of households with no vehicle ownership. However, families previously owning vehicles have added more to their inventory. Other observations can be attributed to changes in the concentration and number of points of interest, as well as socio-demographic attributes such as household income changes since 2019. And here's the propensity model that was prepared for bicycle activity. You can see that Thousand Oaks Boulevard, Moore Park Road, and the southwest portion of the city are areas for high bike propensity. And again, just a comparison to the 2019 bicycle data. Again, the changes highlighted here may be attributed to the land use or socioeconomic data that we previously discussed. And we can do any technical questions later at the end of the presentation. So moving on to the 2026 ATP recommendations, we took the 2019 ATP and updated it with the current data as described. And we built upon, we also took into consideration unbuilt projects that were still included in the 2019 ATP, as well as evaluated public feedback. All of that information was used to develop this list of recommendations of 36 bike corridor improvements, 15 intersection improvements, and those consist of both recommended bike and pedestrian improvements, 34 proposed sidewalks to fill in existing gaps, and a variety of programs. And so you can see here we have 8.34 miles of upgrading existing Class 2 bike lanes to Class 2 bike lanes with a buffer, 15.8 miles of installing new Class 2 bike lanes onto roadway segments with an existing Class 3 bike route or no existing bike facility at all, 1.71 miles of Class 3 bike routes, 5.18 miles of upgrading Class 2 bike lane to a Class 4 separated bikeway, as well as 24 miles of sidewalks. And we will now look at the recommendation process. So the 2026 ATP utilizes the 2025 Active Transportation Program Small Infrastructure Scoring Rubric from the California Transportation Commission, prepared with Caltrans as guidance to help score these projects. This rubric essentially is a checklist for what grant reviewers look to see to feel confident that a project will serve the right community, that it will be used, improve safety, and reflect real public input. The rubric is organized into 5 questions, and together they cover equity, demand, safety, engagement, and readiness. The city does not have a dedicated funding source for these proposed ATP projects, so meeting these components are essential to obtain grant funding. So just to note differences from the 2019 ATP project scoring system. The 2019 focused mainly to the propensity model, and as noted here, the current system does take into the equity, demand, safety, as well as the propensity and level of traffic stress. We will now look at a few of the recommended improvements. Here are the top scoring bike corridor improvements that will require future funding sources. And just wanted to note that all projects are conceptual and further studied to determine the feasibility and/or additional community outreach may be required. I just wanted to note that you'll see that Thousand Oaks is listed a few times here, and in total it actually has 5 separate corridors for a total of 0.6 miles of Class 2 bike lanes buffered from Wilbur Road to Moore Park Road, and then another 4.1 miles of Class 2 bike lanes from Moore Park Road to Via Merida. And the reason that this is broken down into these 5 segments is in order to implement in manageable portions. So each section has a different context and a different set of stakeholders that need to be taken into consideration for implementation. Here are the top scoring bike corridor improvements that can be achieved through the city's pavement program. Appendix B of the 2026 ATP contains additional information regarding notes on what needs to happen to implement. For example, does that involve narrowing travel lanes, modifying medians, removing parking, or converting a travel lane, as well as providing project scoring information for each individual project. In addition, while these projects are ordered based off of the scoring system, it is intended to be used as a resource for decision makers when pursuing funding and construction opportunities in the future. And here's a look at the top scoring intersection improvements that address both bike and pedestrian needs. Again, it should be noted that all projects are conceptual and further studied to determine feasibility and/or additional community outreach may be required. The recommended improvements consist of the following that you can see on here. Add transition lanes. A transition lane are short designated lanes that guide bicyclists laterally across the roadway as they approach an intersection or a conflict area. And oftentimes these are marked green for added emphasis and visibility. We also have leading pedestrian intervals, or LPIs. This gives pedestrians an opportunity to enter a crosswalk at an intersection before a vehicle is given a green indication, and that provides additional visibility to pedestrians. Wanted to note that bicyclists are also allowed to utilize LPIs, so this improvement serves both bikes and pedestrians. We also have recommendations for curb radii, and tightening a curb radii is a traffic calming measure for vehicles as they approach an intersection for their turn. Appendix B of the 2026 ATP, again, contains additional information on what might need to happen to implement, such as modifying medians to provide space, as well as project scoring information. It also notes the right-of-way of each intersection, whether that be city, Caltrans, or both. And if within Caltrans right-of-way, additional coordination must occur, such as the Moore Park Road at Highway 101 intersection listed here. And here you'll see the top 10 scoring sidewalk improvements. Again, Appendix B provides additional information regarding which side of the roadway is missing, cost estimates, and individual scoring information. Again, the order of these recommended improvements are intended for guidance as the city reviews opportunities for implementation. And just to take a look at a few examples of these projects, here is Thousand Oaks Boulevard between Moore Park Road to Herbs Road. This is about a 1.5-mile stretch in which the recommendation is to install Class 2 bike lanes. This may require narrowing of the travel lane, parking lane, and/or sidewalk to implement. It also recommends providing transition lanes throughout the intersections it passes. And currently, this roadway is served by a Class 3 bike route. As mentioned earlier, Thousand Oaks Boulevard is 5 different segments, and further study may be required given the context of each of these individual segments. Here you'll see Newberry Road from Borchard Road to Giant Oak Avenue, in which the recommendation is to install Class 2 bike lanes. You can see on the west leg of the intersection, there are no existing bike facilities. However, on the east leg, there are bike lanes on the eastern corridor from Giant Oak Avenue down to Ventu Park Road. This would provide continuity to the existing bike lanes by extending them westward. This also maintains existing parking on the north side of Newberry Road and is an example of a project that is achievable through the city's pavement program. And just a quick example of an intersection improvement, this is Hillcrest Drive at Herbs Road, in which the recommendation is to add transition lanes on the eastbound and westbound approaches of Hillcrest Drive. In order to do so, you might look at modifying the median to accommodate the space needed for these transition lanes. This would support the existing Class 3 bike route that's on the west leg and the Class 2 bike lanes that currently exist on the east leg of Hillcrest Drive. The westbound bike lane on Hillcrest Drive currently drops off about 350 feet before the intersection, so a transition lane will help guide bikes through that westbound right turn lane and try to manage both bicyclists and vehicles. The city may also consider tightening the curb radii, which again is a traffic calming measure. And just to show some projects that are currently in design, there are 7 corridor in design projects as well as 4 intersection improvement projects. The key corridor improvements include segments of Lynn Road, Hillcrest Drive, and Cannon Road, while key intersections include Avenida de los Arboles at Avenida de las Pontes, as well as the intersection of Hillcrest Drive at Lynn Road. Now, just to take you through a quick project timeline, I know we covered a few of these events already. LLG held a project kickoff meeting with city staff from multiple departments on March 5th of 2025. From there, we launched the public outreach phase on the development of the draft ATP. We hosted public workshops and attended BAT meetings, and based on the analysis, discussion with city staff, and public feedback, we then developed the list of recommended improvement projects. The draft 2026 ATP was published on February 10th. We also launched the second phase of public outreach last month to present the draft ATP and its recommendations, where we returned to BAT and Traffic Commission. In addition, the city attended a few outreach events to solicit additional feedback on the draft ATP. Comments were reviewed and evaluated to formulate the current 2026 ATP released last week that we have presented here tonight. And this brings us to the next steps, in which, 1, find that the active transportation plan is statutorily exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act pursuant to Public Resources Code section 21080.20, and 2, adopt resolution adopting the 2026 active transportation plan. Again, I want to thank you for having us here tonight, and we are here for any questions or comments that you might have.
Thank you. That was a great and detailed presentation. Let's start with any questions for staff. Ms. Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor, and thank you so much for the report and this brilliant work. I'm really excited about this item for a few different reasons, but I'll start with my questions. You noted that there was a drop in the collisions, both pedestrian and I think you said cyclists, right? Correct? Thank you. And while that percentage is dropping, my question is, and we're making these improvements, is there an increase in pedestrians? Is there, or walking, or this type of, is there a further activation of folks traveling through these methods in these spaces where they already have high propensity type of walkers, cyclists, and things of that nature?
I don't, to answer your question, I don't think that this effort took into consideration, citywide counts, how we would typically establish if there's what the baseline is in that, and then if there's been a delta, if there's been a change.
Yeah.
Certainly, the plan is intended to increase all those active modes of transportation. And so, that's something that we could look at on a project-by-project basis when we establish counts, and if there's been a improvement after establishing, a new mode of travel, a new active mode of travel in those particular projects. But I don't think that we have the data to support a conclusion in that way right now.
Not a problem. My curiosity took me there based on the lens that I'm looking through, which is the downtown plan and wanting it to be a more walkable boulevard, and also because I think that conversation alludes to a generational kind of like mind shift in our culture throughout the city, and so I'm trying to see if we've captured it at all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Newman.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for your report very much. I have several questions, so if it seems like it's running a bit long, I'll stop and yield back and maybe ask the rest of the questions
Sounds
later.
good.
Let's begin with the plan is very comprehensive. There's a lot of data. Clearly, you've done a lot of work here. It enumerates 36 bike corridor improvements and 15 intersection projects just for cycling alone. It also notes that in the previous ATP version from 2019, 6 of those got done that were in the previous plan. And similarly, when this current draft of the 2026 plan came to the Traffic and Transportation Advisory Commission recently, the question was asked, well, how many, that's a lot of projects, how many of these realistically are we going to get done in the next 5-6 years? And the answer was something like 5 or 6, most likely, as you said, provided funding, grant funding comes around. So given that, not 36 projects or 15 projects or 36 plus 15, but 5 or 6, I have 3 questions. One is, how do we go about prioritizing these so that the projects most in need are the ones that move forward?
Thank you, Council Member. So related to the priority list, as mentioned in the presentation, there were several factors involved. The Caltrans rubric, which is they administer a majority of the grants that the city has, that the city qualifies for and has previous experience obtaining. It has a list of components such as disadvantaged communities and locations that would increase the potential to have active transportation users. So those components are looked into for the priority. Again, this is a guidance. If there's other grant opportunities where another project farther down the list is a better representative of it, we can endeavor to apply for that project. I also wanted to provide a clarification. There was the 6 bike projects that was mentioned in the that were completed in the 2019 ATP, but there were many more completed through the pavement program. And so this update to the active transportation plan essentially went through that exercise and had two tables, one requiring grant funding, one that can be done through the pavement program with no additional grant funding needed. Anytime there's a pavement program every 2 years, if there's a street that is touched within that program, we can implement it. So it is dependent on two things: what locations, the pavement program, the scope of the pavement program, and also the availability of grant funding, and which city staff will endeavor to achieve as much as we are able to.
Okay, so coming back to the question I asked.
Can I?
I'm sorry, Mr.
Yeah,
Gerber.
of course.
Please.
So, as Mark mentioned, one of the updates that we made to this presentation, to the plan, as a result of some of the feedback, including what was discussed at the Traffic Commission, was to address the fact that there's a lot of projects here, there's a lot of scope to manage, and there's a concern as to what are we going to accomplish. So to highlight a different aspect of the point that Mark was making, by splitting the information into different tables, what can be accomplished through a paving program. And the reason that's important is because we're already paving. As we pave, we can more easily make striping and marking corrections, changes. And so it's almost presumed that as those projects fall through the paving program, as we progress through the years, those projects will get done. The corridor, the other table that we've added is the projects that are already in design. So those projects don't even necessarily have a rating, a prioritization, because they're already in progress.
And I'll come back to those because I do have a question about one of those in particular. But I take your point that at a high level, you're saying there's this other thing, the pavement program, that could cover a lot of this, yes?
Yes, and then the last part of that is, as we mentioned about the funding, identifying the projects that are a high priority, a good idea, are popular, but don't necessarily have the funding at the moment, but that we can establish them in the plans, that we can pursue the funding. That's also very important, so that the projects that are not always the highest priority and most popular don't always have the funding available. So it's important for us to segregate those ideas out so people can understand that there's multiple dimensions to the prioritization.
Right. And on that point, the question I raised about how do we prioritize, Mr. Bueno, if I understood your response correctly, you're saying that there are multiple criteria, the propensity model being one, but there are others, such as equity and other factors. And it's the totality of those, looking at projects that check the most of those boxes will be the ones that have the highest likelihood for success. Do I have that right in terms of the city's willingness to move forward with those projects?
Just a clarification on that, it's the ones that hit those components for the Caltrans rubric, those are more likely to receive grant funding for. And we balance that with the level of traffic stress and propensity model to kind of get an overall priority guidance for this list.
Great. Thank you. That actually answers my next question, which is what we can do to best ensure that these move forward. And it sounds like the more boxes we check, the higher the probability of receiving grant funding. Is that?
That is correct.
Next, I want to follow up on something Councilmember Gutierrez mentioned, which is the downtown project. Among many other things, it does a lot of things, but one of them is to emphasize walkability and bikeability. And there are lots of options there, but we should be clear that the downtown project will also add thousands of new car trips every day. It just will. I mean, that's the reality of adding more housing, more retail, even more city facilities. There will be more car trips from this. So given that, and given that financial resources are finite, and that the project will need to account for all these new car trips, both in motion and parked, how do we protect all the work we've done here with ATP? How do we protect the project's walkable and bikeable aspects?
Yes, Councilmember Newman. The ATP during the evaluation looked at future traffic volumes contained in the general plan update, the projections to 2045. So those traffic volumes are reflected in the recommendations that were made. So if the road capacity required the number of lanes in each direction, other aspects were looked at. Can the center median be modified to accommodate additional roadway width for bike lanes, do sidewalk adjustments, and other aspects. So that all went into to inform the recommendations. And again, the active transportation plan is intended to be updated every 5 to 7 years. So we could take another look, see where we're at the next update, and make any adjustments or recommendations at that time as well.
I'd also like to add to that, if I can help.
Please.
Being, involved in the downtown project. So, in terms of protecting that project's intention to promote, active transportation, walking and biking, as you see in the model that was developed here, the propensity model, it's really about providing the attractors and the generators to, in essence, promote active transportation. So really, the design philosophy around the downtown project includes a lot of those aspects: a park, many shops, residential housing, a hotel. The project itself is designed in order to incorporate into the downtown area and connect to all those active transportation networks that we're trying to build with the ATP.
Right. So it may tie into projects elsewhere in the city that would get people to the downtown, but not necessarily be reflected in the immediate vicinity. Is that it?
No, I'd characterize it differently. I'd say that the immediate vicinity of the downtown project has the opportunity to evolve to support the downtown project, especially as the downtown project is going to be developed in such a way that it attracts those types of transportation modes.
Okay, so I misstated it then. You're saying there could be capacity for substantially more walking and biking options in the immediate vicinity of the downtown project.
Yes, I think that is, what we're targeting to, consider. But understanding that project's in entitlement and there's many steps to go.
And there will be thousands more car trips per day. It's a balancing act, and I'm curious.
I'd say thousands more trips, and we can have an impact on how those modes of travel operate.
I'm eager to see how that balance will work out.
Absolutely, I think we all are.
Yeah. The final set of questions I have is about an intersection that is not one of the 15 projects listed. I guess because it's currently under development anyway, and that is the intersection at Hillcrest and Lynn. And it's a known problem for cyclists and has been for many years. And this is subjective. This is just my personal opinion, but it's a critical juncture for cyclists in the city because it is a connector between Newbury Park and Points East, the rest of Thousand Oaks and Westlake Village, particularly going westbound into Newbury Park. It's very problematic because cyclists looking to turn left onto Lynn Road from Hillcrest have to cross 3 or 4 lanes of traffic that are going at pretty high speeds, 45, 50 miles an hour plus, to get into those left turn lanes currently. And many cyclists, hundreds to thousands of cyclists in the area avoid that because of the car and truck contention with cycling. So there was a draft version of changes, proposed changes, at the time the plan came to TTAC that showed there would be some modifications. It's part of changes, I guess, as part of the Lynn Road upgrades we're already doing. But the changes were only that there would be a wider crosswalk on the west side of, it'd be on Lynn Road, but it would be on the west side of Lynn. which means that cyclists would still have to contend with cars and trucks looking to turn right, again at high speed, turn right onto Lynn to get across to that crosswalk. And this seems really inadequate to me, and potentially quite dangerous. There are other ways we could do this intersection. I've repeatedly brought this up to staff. There have been comments made about this at TTAC. I'm wondering what we can do to make that intersection safer for cyclists, certainly, but also for drivers and pedestrians as well.
Sure. So I think the overall intention of the plan is to try to address enhancements, resolve conflicts, produce improved facilities across the multiple projects that it lists. The plan's pretty immense. Every time I go through it, I actually pick up a couple things that I didn't the previous time. That's one of the reasons we updated our slide deck tonight from the TTAC, is that we do have that intersection actually represented in a couple different places, not just in the Lynn Corridor project and the Hill Corridor project in the one corridor table, but we do have Lynn and Hillcrest represented in the in-design intersection table as well. So, if I can highlight any point of that, it's that those projects are a high priority, and they are in design, meaning that there's a number of design and dimension challenges in those projects that we still have to vet through the individual project design process. So I know our team has considered this pretty extensively. I went back myself and looked over the materials from the TTAC meeting that you're talking about, and there was even some presentations earlier than that. So there is some work to do in terms of developing that design further to address some of the challenges that you're mentioning. We don't have that type of level of detail in the plan, but certainly your comments are well heard, and it's an area that we want to prioritize, and we represented that in how we've selected the projects.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Mr. Mayor, I have additional questions, but I'll hold off for now so as not to hog up the whole thing.
I'm tempted to say you're going to be the guy for the questions, so let's just run them out.
Are you sure?
If you have questions, as everybody can tell, Mr. Newman is an avid cyclist. He actually took a pretty bad slam about a month ago, and this is his first time joining us since that. So, number one, it's good to have you back. Number two, if you've got him, rip through them.
Well, Mr. Mayor, since you raised it, this is probably an appropriate point for me to express my gratitude to my colleagues and to staff for allowing me to participate remotely while I was recovering from my injuries 8 weeks ago, last Saturday. So I'm very glad to be back here in person and very grateful to all of my friends and colleagues. Thank you. It's also maybe a good opportunity to point out that the safety is ever present in the mind of cyclists, and avoiding any chance to avoid the car/truck bicycle interface is a good thing. And I think generally the ATP takes that as a starting point. We want separation. We want increased safety. We're doing that. We have excellent facilities now, but there's always room for improvement. On that, because cycling can be so helpful, my remaining questions, one is high level and then two others are kind of detailed questions. The high level one is the report begins by setting out some general goals, one of which is to reduce vehicle miles traveled, VMT, which is a standard car model. And so my question on that, if we're promoting ATP here, it's a good thing. We're making our city in some parts, some areas, not all, but some parts, less car-centric. What would you point to in this plan that reduces VMT? What are the top thing or things we're doing that reduce that?
So with the ATP, any of these recommended projects would reduce VMT in the sense of removing gaps in the bike and pedestrian network. This kind of ties in with the Climate and Environmental Action Plan, also referred to as the CEAP. It lists greenhouse gas emissions and vehicle miles traveled reduction goals. Active transportation plans don't typically include those reductions in a project-to-project basis. It's looked at in the CIAP as a citywide standpoint. And the CIAP does note goals for the ATP to implement new sidewalk and bike lanes by 2030 and 2045. So any project that is implemented goes toward that, the reduction for it that's indicated in the CIAP.
Okay, and as a follow-up to that, I'm sorry to keep hanging on this Lynn Hillcrest thing, but there is this project already, number 4, IID4 project that's already underway. One of the reasons that this intersection is even more important is that there is this project underway to put Class 4 bike lanes over a long stretch of Lynn Road, all the way from Reno through to Hillcrest and on up to Gainsborough, which means hopefully we reduce VMT, we have more cyclists, both recreational and functional, let's call it, commuters, shoppers, whatever, using that new and safer Lynn Road corridor, but then getting to Hillcrest and having this, what I would currently characterize as not as safe as what we're doing on Lynn because of the interface between cars and bikes. So that to me makes it even more important that we work out some safe way to get cyclists, safer way to get cyclists through that intersection. It's a really important intersection. Speaking of which, and these are the two low-level points I want to make. These are just presentation issues I had. On page 88 of the report, there's a figure that's showing where we are proposing different classes of bike lanes, Class 2, Class 3, Class 4, and so on. It's figure 4.1 on page 88. And it labels Hillcrest between Lynn and Points East. I forget whether it goes all the way to Moore Park, but along Hillcrest there. It labels that as a Class 4 project in the type of graphic that's used to show it. But then there's a table that lists every single potential improvement. And the table doesn't say that. The table says it may be Class 4, but it may be Class 2. So how do we go about determining what actually is going to be Class 4 or what's going to be Class 2?
You know, again, it's a good question. It really comes down to the design of that specific project. I think that our proposed plan identifies that would be a potential alternative to develop a Class 4 along that route. But the table, I think, expresses, I'm trying to grab that table here. I think the difference between the map and the table is essentially what is proposed by the plan evaluation versus the project table breaks it down into, pieces, identifies, what could potentially happen in that project. So for example, even the Lynn Road project itself identifies a Class 4, but there could be sections of Class 2 lanes within that project as the design is developed. So I don't think that we're trying to say it's one way or the other. I think we're trying to identify that Class 4 are the priority, the ideal implementation along those routes. But it really comes down to the specific design of that project to see what we can actually implement.
So there was a test along Hillcrest, as you know, the westbound, so the north side of Hillcrest. It was a test that did not make motorists happy or cyclists happy. The motorists were upset that they were losing a lane. There were traffic cones put in there. The cyclists were upset that the complaints that I heard were there was not a lot of notice and there was not a lot of time. And there was not a lot of feedback loop. I'm not saying this is true or not true. I'm saying these are the reports that I received from many cyclists. So I'm not sure that I necessarily would myself advocate for Class 2 or Class 4. I personally think it would be safer to get cyclists across the street to the south side of the street and build a dedicated bike path or bike ped path along that strip, which I think is currently Oaks property. So either get an easement or buy the land or whatever, or maybe the city sidewalk is city property there. But I think that would be safer and would attract more usage than trying to force this usage in lanes that makes neither cyclists nor motorists happy.
Sure, yeah, and I think that's a comment that's right in line with the, the nature of the ATP is that, at a high level, we're trying to accomplish this network, and there can be many different options on how to do that, whether it's utilizing city right-of-way, whether it's developing a development partnership to establish a pathway. These are all options, and they really depend on the aspect of the specific project.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Then the final thing I have is just a comment on, there's some discussion of e-bike usage. I realize this is not the primary focus of the report. We want, of the project, we want people to be more active, not necessarily have motorized help. But in discussing e-bike usage, the survey had 140 responses, something like that. There's a graph that tries to break down what type of whatever people are using, scooters or e-bikes or whatever. I believe the graph is quite misleading because it shows that 88% of everyone is on e-bikes, which is not the case. It's only 41 people answered that question. And of those 41, 88% said, yeah, we use e-bikes. But it's not of the total universe of 140 respondents. I understand that may be just a function of the graphing software that was used for the poll, but it's not the case that we hear complaints. It's not the case that 88% of cyclists in Thousand Oaks are on e-bikes, no matter what you may read on social media. It's just not. The actual number is much lower, and of the people who responded, right, it's really something like 35%, not 88% of respondents.
Yes, and I'll take the liberty here. So what you're describing is accurate. The way that our survey system charted responses is that it did not consider if someone had skipped a response. So of our 13 questions, almost all those questions, nobody skipped the response, but on one question, we had almost 100 people out of the survey takers skip that, and so it only graphed the remaining people who took it. We tried to correct that in the report, as you mentioned, to identify what that number is in consideration of the number that we didn't receive a response on. And so we were trying to be responsive to that concern of the representation of the graphing software at the end of the report.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I suspect as well, further, that there may be some self-selection bias in that only the people who are e-bikers would even choose to answer that question. So which could mean the actual universe of e-bikers versus the total universe of all bikers is a greater ratio still. So
sure, yeah. That's a good point. We were very happy that many of the comments received aligned with the objectives of the report. It is hard to identify those that nuance in some of the statistical information there, but your point's understood. I
appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, I just have one thing real quick before we move to public comments. One, the before and after on Rancho Road, that was a great before and after. I thought it looked way better after than the first, so that was a great look. Second, my only question is, and I'm going to ask this just because traffic is something we hear very frequently from our residents. When you mention traffic calming, is that taking a wider singular road and making it smaller? Or is traffic calming when you take two roads, or two lanes, excuse me, and move them into one?
I'd say it's not necessarily one thing, but maybe Mark, you can elaborate on, there's traffic calming is really a strategy, and it can incorporate a lot of different pieces, parts of a toolbox.
Right.
Yes, and I could start off, and then Ms. Basic could probably continue if I miss anything. But as mentioned, there's a variety of options for traffic calming. There could be speed radar signs, rectangular rapid flashing beacons, tightening up the curb radii so that the turns, you have to slow as you make a right turn, lane conversions to bike lanes. All of that is incorporated as part of traffic calming to have the potential to reduce vehicle speeds. One simple thing that's been done through the pavement program is narrowing travel lanes. That in itself is a traffic calming feature. And so there's, many tools in the toolbox to implement traffic calming overall.
Understood. Thank you. All right, we're going to move over to public speakers. We have one tonight, and I will call up Benjamin Quo. Benjamin Quo. And thank you for being so patient with us tonight.
Great. Well, thanks for having me here. And my name is Ben Quo. I live in Newbury Park, and I've been involved with the city's bicycle advisory team. And unlike other cyclists, I'm actually what I call a utilitarian cyclist, where I actually use a bike to get around, to go to the store, to go to the library, to just run errands. And so I think it lends a different aspect than someone who's just out there for recreation. I did make this comment to the Traffic and Transportation Commission, but I did want to compliment the staff members and at the City of Thousand Oaks, as well as Lynn Scott Law and Greenspan, because I think they did some very diligent work on the plan, and particularly the attention they gave to very straightforward and strong safety improvements that can be accomplished using the paving program. So they did a really good job at that, and I think even that, despite despite a lack of budget from the city for anything. So I would like to, after seeing that though, I did want to make a comment that it does look like we have an issue that isn't really being addressed, which is Hillcrest Drive, and all of the BAT team members mentioned that as a top #1 aspect. And so I think really anything we can do to fix that problem, I think everyone involved, I think every single BAT member mentioned that. And then the other thing I noticed personally is this freeway overpasses are a huge issue for anyone trying to walk or cycle in Thousand Oaks, and anything that can be done there. I know there's a lot of regulatory things, there's a lot of cost involved with that, but those can make a huge difference for both pedestrians and cyclists. And then, but the reason I am here is to speak to City Council, which is, although I know there's interest in this because of grant money and because of regulatory issues, I would really encourage you guys to look beyond just this plan and the need for grants and that sort of thing, and look at how to more aggressively move forward on active transportation, helping people walk more, bicycle more, and get out of their cars. If you look at some cities across the area, I would particularly point to the city of Santa Barbara, and if anyone's ever been up there, they have done a huge transformation there, which is bicycle lanes, class 4 lanes. They even have a downtown area which is all bicycle and pedestrian, and it's a huge thing. And they've done that not just with grant money. So there's a possibility that you can step forward as a city council and say, hey, we should put some money into some of these projects. And so I'd like to encourage you to do that. It's wonderful there where they actually have residential streets, which are made for just cycling and pedestrians, and the residents can still get in there. But the wonderful thing, and I know we often have people coming here asking for speed bumps, they've figured out a way where cars don't go zooming down the streets, but bicycles and pedestrians can go through with modal filters, and there are a lot of things that the staff would know about, and I'd encourage you guys to do that as well. And finally, the last thing I want to say is, we're talking about $5, $6, $7, maybe $10 a gallon gas now, And this is the kind of time where these kind of things can really help shift people out of their cars. And realize that what you guys do now as a city council changes how this community can handle those things in 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. And this is, in fact, last week was what they say was a once in 4,433 year heat wave due to the climate impacts. And so your opportunity here is to make transportation, active transportation, a key part of things. And so I urge you to go beyond this plan and put some of this into a budget even, and advance all the things that are in this active transportation plan and more. And then get on a bike and get out walking and actually see how these things work. Thank you.
Would staff like to respond to any of Benjamin's comments?
I'd say those comments are very much appreciated. Appreciate your service on the BAT, the constructive comments. You certainly gave us a lot of feedback to work with the community moving forward on any of these projects.
Any additional questions from council? All right, I will now close the public hearing. And would anyone like to make a comment or a motion? Mr. Adams.
Here we go. I'm back. Well, since the downtown came up, I just feel compelled to add a comment or two. It's being designed as a pedestrian-friendly project without a doubt. There will be some residential there, but the cars attached to that, I think the number will be more in the low 100s than thousands. And there'll be plenty of adequate parking for those cars. And don't forget, the people living there will have acres and acres of area to walk around and enjoy the amenities and shop, et cetera. So the walkability there will be there. And as far as people visiting the downtown, we envision it as kind of a park once situation, where you park your car one time and you get out and walk to all the destinations versus driving your car from destination to destination to destination. So in actuality, I think the way the downtown's designed, it will keep traffic down versus accentuating. And I think it's going to follow the complete streets analysis, wider sidewalks, traffic calming in the front, maybe just slow people down as they go through it, things like that. So it will, without a doubt, be pedestrian friendly.
Mr. Engler.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you to staff for this beautiful presentation. A lot of work went into it, you can tell. The thing I want to really thank you for is the extensive public outreach that you did. We have the BAT who's coming in and helping us with some ideas, a council member who is happy to add some ideas, which is great. That public input is very important for such a seismic change in the way we approach transportation. I'm a big proponent of active transportation, even with e-bikes, because it does help with our GHG production, lowering it, and vehicle miles traveled will be traveled in an active way rather than passively in your vehicle. I think the goal of what we're trying to do is exemplary. The 2019 plan, I tried to jot down what you were saying at the time. I'm looking at 70, 80 improvements that we made in the infrastructure for bicycles in this last 6, 8 years. That's a step forward. We have to remember that our city was built to accommodate vehicles. It was built around the car. So to make this transition now to a more active transportation does take time, and sadly does take money. And I think the type of changes we're making are incremental changes, which is what we need to do given the constraints of our budgets and in constraints of the way our city developed. We're not like Santa Barbara or even Ventura that was built on a grid. We were built along an old highway. And that handicaps us somewhat in going to our active transportation. And then all the things you mentioned as far as our 2026 goals, those are aspirational goals. There's things that we really need to do, and I appreciate what people are saying about Hillcrest and Lynn Road. That's a very high-traveled road, and as pointed out by my colleague, it's a vital connection point between east and west, north and south that we should maybe move up on our plans as much as we can. But given the constraints of our budgets, given the constraints of the grants we can get, and the fact that we are playing catch-up somewhat with the way our city developed over the last 40 or 50 years, it's aspirational on our part, and I find a lot of inspiration in what we've accomplished so far.
Ms. Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mayor. My comments, I think I could just second what our public commenter, Ben, put really nicely throughout your comment, really. And, but if I were to elaborate any, and really just congratulate the team on really brilliant work, and I think very intentionally approaching this year, or not even year, but like plan after plan as we move forward. I really appreciated the propensity modeling, and the heat maps and just visual aids are really digestible, both for myself and I'm sure other community members. So I just want to thank you for doing that work based on feedback and data collection and things of that nature. I think the more digestible we make this information, the more engaging it can be, and helping bridge the understanding and the value proposition for our community. Because I'm going to just harp on this point, our downtown plan is, as you all were alluding to quite directly, is built around this same intention of walkability, bikeability, and even including those trajectories in this next plan was right on par with what I expect from staff. But so I just want to call that out as far as even the intention of saying we are making investment within the city using other programs to make sure that as many projects as possible can be completed by bringing in the pavement program and things of that nature. So I just wanted to really highlight all of those, similar to my colleague, Mr. Engler, or Councilmember Engler, saying, you know, we did get quite a bit done. And I think that we will do the same going forward. My other comment rather is I would really like to see a measurement of success. And because I think you're doing a lot of the footwork. When I get excited about downtown, yes, it's going to be beautiful. It's going to be a sense of place and a center for community. But I also think that it's going to change the culture of Thousand Oaks generationally around active transportation and really like our wellness, our collective wellness, for all intensive purposes related to health, our own bodies, but like how we contribute in the footprint towards, you know, the environment and things of that nature, gas prices. So yeah, just I could go on just because it hits on two of my favorite things, which are like community and downtown. But thank you again for such brilliant work, and I'll move that we, I think this is a resolution, yes, that we move forward with the recommendation to adopt the resolution as staff recommended, and that we are exempt from CEQA.
Mr. Newman? None. Okay. All right, so my dad's in the audience. He's a big cyclist. If he was on city council, we'd be here about an hour longer. Him and Newman would have been going back and forth at staff. You know, I have a family of 7. I have 5 kids. And riding bikes is a thing for us. You know, we'll take trips up to Ojai, we'll park in an area, we'll drive the path into downtown. It's super fun for us. And that's one goal that we're looking at with downtown that Mr. Adams talked about, is how do we have a hub or a center that people can go and actually be active in and walk around and ride. And I think the idea is what I'm going to end up doing. I'm going to transport my basketball team of a family to downtown. We're going to get out. We're going to hang out for a few hours. We're going to ride around. We're going to walk. And I think for me, when I'm looking at policies like this, I'm trying to find the balance because, number one, my family relies on a car. The majority of us rely on cars. And I think if you ask the majority of people if their goal is to not drive a car anymore and ride a bike, I do not think that would be their goal. But there are people that, number one, enjoy riding bikes, and number two, as Benjamin spoke, he rides his bike everywhere. That is his transportation. So how do we set up a city so that we are not making it almost impossible to drive cars and make everybody ride bikes, but how cars can still get around without intensive traffic and people can still be safe and actually have a city that's connected? And I think this policy achieves that. So I will support the motion. Now that we have a motion on the board, why doesn't the city clerk prepare us for a vote?
Councilmember Gutierrez? Ah, I see, thank you. That motion passes 5-0.
All right, next up is our department report. Does staff have a presentation tonight? Excuse me? Oh, I am sorry. I'm rushing you guys to the scene. I'll give you 1 minute. I'll give you 2 minutes. Good to go? All right. Does staff have a presentation for tonight?
Thank you, Mayor. We do not have a presentation tonight.
Okay, considering that, I will open up public speakers. We have one speaker tonight on Zoom, and that is Andrea Lisi. You have 3 minutes, Andrea.
Hi, Mr. Mayor, council members. Andrea Lisi on behalf of GI Industries, a resident of City of Seal Beach. I've been practicing land use and environmental issues for 26 years under the California Environmental Quality Act, and I have never been privy to a project where an applicant such as this and the franchise agreement at issue has hid and misled an agency with a lot of different evidence that has since come to light since this matter was before the council in 2021. So here tonight to urge the council to consider, as required by the Court of Appeal, our letter and evidence submitted, and to do so carefully, and to seize this opportunity to direct staff to embark on an environmental review process that should have been required back in 2021 to analyze the differences in the material that is collected by Athens as opposed to how it was collected, processed, and disposed of prior to the effective date of the franchise agreement in 2021. And therefore, finally, it disclose all the environmental impacts of the franchise agreement and consider those and mitigate those impacts. And it's not too late to do the right thing. The evidence that's before you now is evidence that we were unable to submit to the council in 2021 because of the lack of notice of the specific CEQA exemptions, but also because there was no way to know what the entire scope of the whole of the franchise agreement entailed at that time. So it was also evidence that the council was not allowed or privy to consider at that time. So 5 years, 6 years ago, the cornerstone of the city's RFP process was environmental sustainability. Yet at the time, there was a lot of confusion about where Athens proposed to store, maintain, and refuel its collection trucks at a local yard, among other issues. Councilmember Adam may remember that there were a lot of questions about the Santa Paula yard off Corporation Street, which Athens had said that they would immediately build out should they receive the franchise agreement award. Come to find out that was not the case, and Athens was actually pursuing a site in Conejo from the Conejo Valley Unified School District. That Conejo property was never subject to any environmental review. It was necessary for Athens to service the franchise agreement, but nobody ever had any time to consider or knowledge to consider the impacts. Then fast forward, the interim time was used to process or collect and store collection trucks at the Hillcrest yard on 225 West Hillcrest Drive. And trucks were going back and forth.
Thank you, Andrea. I'm sorry, that was the 3 minutes
minutes.
available for public comment. Thank you for being with us tonight. Would staff like to respond to comments?
We have no comments at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Does council have any comments, or would somebody like to make a motion? Mr. Adams.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. I'll move the department report 12A and the staff recommendations 1 through 3.
Thank you. Will the clerk prepare the vote?
And that motion passes 5-0.
All right, thank you. Next up is announcements from our city manager, Drew Powers.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. We will be back together again on the 14th of April. On that evening, we'll be celebrating Crossing Guard Appreciation Week. We'll have a presentation by Las Virgenes on their brine line under special presentations. And then we'll have a public hearing on a piece of property that we're in collaboration with CRPD on taking over. And a department report relating to our People's Self-Help Housing for Sale affordable housing project that is slated for construction at Herbs and Hillcrest. And a couple of reports from recent council travels. So we'll round out our evening. That'll be the 14th of April.
Thank you, Mr. Powers. I will now adjourn the meeting to the next regular meeting on April 14th.